Since I'm sitting in the front, maybe I'll just ask a question, even though I've asked one before. I was particularly concerned about this last talk in contrast to, for example, the second plenary and of course, some of our talks here about there's a lot more to the body than just vision and hearing, right? That to physical experience. So I find it unlikely that virtual reality is going to replace, it might enhance and draw attention to the aesthetic of the space and the immediacy of people that you're physically with. But I don't know if we should aspire to reduce our amount of sensory experience and our physical experience.
We should definitely not, and I really don't think that we should replace all the design and the built environment in just shoebox spaces. It was just like a very extreme suggestion of let us think and debate where we're going towards to. I do agree that there is a lot more about vision, but in virtual reality experiences, you can definitely get more of these senses working. So vision has a significant role in it, no doubt. But I do think that we can use it in a much more clever way than just building a shoebox, as I suggested, and just project much more detailed and exciting environments. But I definitely think we should use that somehow. We should find a way to use it in the right way, but not in that extreme manner.
And I'm sorry to do one more question back to the first talk. If the city is an extension of all of our consciousness, which I love, and I actually agree, I think it probably already is, but that means we're all sort of this sharing a consciousness. I mean, cities are shared environments. So what are the consequences for that in terms of privacy and interdependence? Or
I would suggest that they can be overlapping, that I think we're actually getting far more sophisticated about the whole privacy question now. And I mean, there's a lot of people who are actively doing research into that. So I think there'll be far more freedom in the future for those individual multiplicity of distributed consciousnesses to be both overlapping, but also you can elect to share them. I mean, if you wanted to merge your urban consciousness with someone else, you could elect to do so. Or you could elect to merge parts of them. But I think privacy is such an issue now that we are actively striving to sort that out. I think we're going to sort it out, the privacy question, way before we sort out the distributed cognition question, actually.
All right. Oh, is there a hand in the back there? I'm still not seeing hands yet. So I'll keep asking questions.
Okay, try it in one.
Just an observation to agree with what Professor Ruth was saying. Looking at some of the stuff that's being presented, there are terrifying opportunities for hacking and abuse of data and infringement of privacy. And this stuff needs to be included at the beginning and not bolted on at the end, in my humble opinion. I'm very pleased to see that's being taken into account, but the threat that this technology creates needs to be considered as well as the benefits.
Can I just respond to that for a moment? I mean, interestingly enough, we've just set up a new research centre at Northumbria University, and it actually sits between 3 departments. So it sits between the Department of Architecture and the Built Environment, between computer science, but also information science. And the theme of it, I think it's called Digital Living, but actually it was meant to be looking at the overlap between the city, computer science, and security and privacy. So again, we've really tried to bring that in right at the beginning. So I'm glad you also said that.
I'm not entirely sure who our audience is, but for any of you who are doing startups or whatever, one of the things people are recommending is right from the beginning having someone on the board whose full-time job is to learn about security. So yeah, big issue. Any other questions or comments about the questions so far, or questions in the audience? Okay, we've got one in the front here and then one in the back.
So I was just blown away by all of this technology that's coming along, this virtual reality and enhanced reality, and this ability that we've developed to make environments that are perfectly suited to the human mind and the human social. What slightly worries me is that we've become so good at making these fantastic environments for ourselves that we've become disconnected to some extent from the natural world that we share with millions of other species who don't thrive on concrete or virtual reality or all of this kind of stuff. And it feels a little bit like, wonderful though this technology is, it's not solving the problem that we live on a finite planet that we're running out of space on, and we're destroying all of the other creatures on, and people are being progressively removed from it. So is there any move to try and reintegrate us with the natural world, or are we just going to say goodbye to it?
I can jump in quickly, which is one of the whole points of cities, is to reduce the compression, to compress the footprint, of all those people. But I think it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're going towards that direction, even though that's the good thing. I think technology gets us towards the other side more, because that side makes more money, I think. And my kind of art of deception was, I think it's going to be used more in the wrong way in the city rather than, and we've got the example in Piccadilly Circus. So the visual influence is not actual influence, is visual garbage more than visual influence. So depends. We're prone, as a human beings, as animals like that, we tend to go towards the dark side more with technology.
I would like to disagree, actually.
Okay.
And I think there's been an interesting other movement going on at the moment, and it's actually what I would call the maker movement. And I think as we're getting more technical and spending more time in the digital realm, I think people are having this urge to make things, to use their hands. People are knitting more than ever. People are gardening more than ever. I mean, all of these people are painting. I think we have this strong urge to make things with our hands and to connect with the world in a tactile way. And I think that, there's no coincidence that all of these things are on the increase at the moment. So although I do find some of the visions or some of the reading between the lines visions of what my fellow speakers said a little horrific, I actually take solace in the fact that things like knitting is on the increase. So, I worry less. I think we'll always have a desire to use our hands and make things and have that tactile connection with the world.
Yeah,
I agree with that, yeah.
Cooperation is absolutely as natural as competition. Every organism is made out of more than two genes working together. Mm-hmm. So I do think we have hope for both directions. But anyway, there was a question way in the back. In the white shirt there. And then now there's another one coming forward as well.
Hello. Yes, I think sort of following on from the last question, particularly for Tasos, it seems like you've almost resigned yourself to the fact that a lot of these new technologies are going to be used primarily for commercial purposes. Because No, not at all. I like playing with them. I was talking just probabilistically that there's a greater probability of happening. It's not mine. I don't like it, and I'm not resigning myself. I like playing with it in a positive way more than the negative. But to be honest, if you look around you, I don't like the way that they use it. So
I think, no, I completely agree with you. And I think one of the things, I commute through Waterloo and I remember seeing all the new screens going up and thinking, yes, finally they're going to have boards that tell you where the trains are, that you can see from more than one tiny location on the platform. And of course it was all advertising screens. So how are there things that we can do that can persuade the people that are funding these new technologies and putting them into our built environment that there is a value to using them for things other than advertising space? What do you think the things we can do are that can begin to get people to think differently about their use?
I think it's the education of, let's say, the new tools, for example. So it's the knowledge, but the knowledge you have to convey, you have to give the designers, let's say, or the marketing guys, the marketing director, you got to show him with some sort of evidence and evidence-based design how he or she can use this screen to do more than this, or at least do it subliminally and still keep kind of a virtual window towards kind of a green space at the back. So let's say that was a projected kind of screen projection. you could still give people the idea that there is kind of a green space at the back, even though it isn't, and still have like some sort of depth with your sign that you can look at it from all directions.
I think you're really overlooking the possibility of philanthropic community engagement, organization, and government. Government is the way that we get together. We spend our money to create public goods like this. So I
but
don't
they need
think
some information. They need some knowledge.
yes, so political
and
engagement
research.
might be one such way to do that. Yeah. Any other?
My only observation was, I think probably, we're preaching to the converted here. I think everyone in this room is very keen on the idea of evidence-based design. I wish someone would tell the advertisers about this, because advertising is notoriously inefficient. If we could only convince them that actually it's a waste of time, them advertising to us, maybe we could get rid of some of it.
Okay, how about the question, the second from the back row?
And that's it.
I didn't want to question. I just wanted to comment on a few of the things which have been said. A lot of the design of enhanced environment and all these techniques, they have enormous opportunities, but they have also a lot of really, really big pitfalls, which can lead to actually making a less and less inclusive design. We have seen that. For example, why did Google Glasses fail? Because people were not able to, in addition, use that information which was available. It was too much. They couldn't cope with it. Why did things like Pokemon Go have the negative side effect of creating quite a lot of falls and accidents in younger people? Because they were distracted from the information which is necessary to navigate safely. So while they're on one side very, very engaging and have had enormous positive benefits, namely getting people to walk more, interacting more, physical activity, etc., they can also have very negative side effects. And I think we do need some kind of regulation in which situations we are allowed to use that as a positive tool and not to actually kill each other.
I think we need to learn how to work with it, because the technology is here and people are going to use it. And we just have to see how it's going to be beneficial for us and what's the potential there, and learn how to, as I said, use it. And just as a comment for the responsibility to the environment, I think that it has a lot of potential in being more responsible to the environment, because it can give you much more information on the environment that surrounds you. And it can make you much more aware of the fact that you have other species or other natural assets, or, as Ruth just showed, the energy consumption of the neighborhood, and it can just put it in front of you and make you aware of these facts. So I think our job is just to learn how to work with it and not try to prevent it.
And understand the boundary. Though that was my closing remark, that you need to understand the threshold of your probably unconscious capacity to compute something, and then when it becomes like an overflow effect and kills your imagination in a way.
Yes, Raoul Bunschoot. Joanna, I'm picking up partly on your comments. When we have an extension of the nerve system of the body into the city, we have a huge potential to create a kind of collective consciousness through which we could, for example, crowdsource new utilities. We could actually make a collective decision to make London Energy Plus, for example. Now, maybe there's two questions. How can we do that? How can we employ these new technologies to do that? And second of all, how do we govern that? Because at the moment, the companies, Amazon, Netflix, Microsoft, that help us to enable to work with these technologies are not accountable really to us as a society. I would say that's, Google has no competitors effectively, and yet sets projects that are society changing. So the question is about democracy. The second question is about democracy. How do we handle the change of democracy that's going to happen?
Since you mentioned me, I'll say very quickly, I'm actually working on some of this with the OECD and also the European Parliament, that the way artificial intelligence transforms society. And as you say, these companies are the ones that are, they are transnational, but we don't have transnational governance, really. So actually, that's a reason why it's very important to participate in transnational governance. But anyway, any other comments on this?
Not really. We're looking at you.
I mean, other than agreeing that it's incredibly important, and if there's any political scientists here in the audience, come and collaborate with some technologists, because yes, I think it is vitally important, but it's outside my remit, outside my field.
It's a big issue because the definition of government is basically redistribution of wealth. A lot of them are falling down at it right now. That is a challenge of democracy. But there is no government above the nation state. And so it's very hard to deal with the fact that the internet has allowed a lot of money to pool in only two countries, basically China and the US. It's interesting.
I've used one of these before. It's quite exciting. Thank you. I found it really inspiring and really interesting. I actually work as I run a retail display agency, and I did actually write a little bit in this anthology. But what I found most interesting was the idea around where we start in terms of design. Do we look at a collective kind of design heuristics where that is kind of governed, where we have to understand how human beings operate, and within any kind of vertical of design within the built environment, we need to kind of be aware of these design heuristics and all kind of be really conscious of them to achieve a more effective and more positively conscious city.
Any responses?
I suppose it was like, do you think something like a collective design heuristics that was relevant for society, would that work?
Well, in some cases, if you always go with the norm and what is collectively understood as correct, then it might become, from talking as an architect more than this, it might become a bit boring. Because I don't really agree with the idea of kind of the symmetry in architecture, so that was a bit of a, for me, it's a non-symmetry. So you have to add your little weird, let's say, thing in all designs, because you have to challenge also your users to do something different every time, maybe, and not build every time the same kind of seat, like the same kind of building, let's say.
And I'm not necessarily saying the design heuristics would have to remain for centuries. They could be updated, but if there was a centralized place to ensure that there wasn't huge negative impacts by design. Probably not possible,
I'm
not
sure how to respond to that, to be honest.
All right, I'm afraid I think we're out of time, or do we have time for one more question? Okay, one more question. Who's bold? Oh, now there's two. Okay, this one, I think slightly faster there.
I'm very interested in how one behavior elicits another behavior. And I think what we possibly need to understand a lot more is once we intervene into a situation, and sometimes those interventions are not very much intended. So the technologists, of course, they program their little Pokemon Go and think about it, oh, how fun it is for people to kind of walk around. And then another thing happens and people bump into each other. Or, I don't know, in London there's so much crime for gangs on mopeds stealing people's mobile phones, where, because we are so used to some of the pictures that Elite has shown, is literally people walking around like this, which, you might as well just give up your phone for free, at least in the area where I live. Maybe that tells more about the area I live in, but I think it's quite interesting how one thing leads to another, and I think we need to be much more thinking about how are we intervening into a situation and what follows after that. And so I think there's certain loops that I would be very interested to hear responses to.
I want to say one thing about the Pokemon Go thing. There was a bunch of stories, especially in Britain, about wild animals that were injured that were discovered only because people doing Pokemon Go happened to stumble across them and they could get them rescued. And then finally there was a story saying actually all the wild animals are being completely stressed by the sudden presence of people all over the place. And that, these weird happy-go-lucky, so I don't know, I'm not a wild animal expert actually, but it was But yes, unintended side effects. Anybody?
I'd just like to make the observation. I think I remember reading somewhere that the definition of a tragedy is where each individual step is absolutely logical and optimal, and yet you see the hero or heroine gradually progressing to what is clearly ultimately a disaster. So what I find quite interesting about your question is, if each step on the way to this utopian future is absolutely logical for that discrete moment in time, how do we avert ourselves potentially ending up in a Greek tragedy if that's the logical outcome? Yeah. I've no idea. Do we do more simulations?
No, probably.
In artificial intelligence, there's a concept of, I forgot what it's called, but anyway, it means that you look for the errors. You take the actions, but you also have a separate system that monitors for errors. So I think again, with information in theory, we might be able to catch these. But
more generations in a neural network, it might solve the problem.
or just more brains, as long as we keep them separate. So that if they're all running the same model, then they all converge on the same solution. So that's why diversity really matters for capturing errors.
But just a final comment to that. I mean, maybe what it actually does bring back to is the question or the comment here about democracy. That maybe the other thing that we need is a number of checks within the system, which would be provided by ordinary people questioning what's going on and saying, actually, is this in our interests? So, I think a lot of it is about opening up the conversation. So it's not just the technologists, but it's everybody having a stake in it and a stake in where we're going.
Okay, I think that's a fantastic thing to close on. So thanks, everyone, and thanks, the panel.